The light's on. This is fine.
No,
All right.
I don't know.
So the screen's gonna get all heated up. It's gonna look like Inception because you can see yourself in the computer. It's like a dream within a dream.
That movie's psycho crazy.
Yeah. Okay, just stay out then.
Okay, sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
about to use the bathroom.
All right. Yep. Take your time. Sorry. Yeah, Brianna, you're doing peer feedback for. 1, 3, and 4. Bless you.
Thank you.
That was really intense.
I told you. I've never heard someone else with a more intense sneeze than I do. It's weird.
I think I could beat you, but
Don't you sneeze like a
no, I'm not a very chew type person.
Yeah, I did.
All right.
I'm not a cheap type person. I'm more rational.
All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, Edwin, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead. Okay.
Alright. Is it wrong? Is it going?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay. So some of the species that we may see in our everyday lives, we may be intimidated by, scared by. However, as we may see these species as harmful or dangerous, they're actually heroes to the environment. In my AP Bio class in my junior year of high school, I had the pleasure of learning about the gray wolves and their journey as a species. In the past year, there's been a lot of controversy regarding the gray wolves, whether or not they should be delisted on the Environmental Protection Agency or not. But I believe that the gray wolves should continue to be protected by the EPA because they are a keystone species. I will further explain what a keystone species is and some of the history of the gray wolves so you guys can get an understanding of why they're so important to keep on the endangered species list. So a keystone species is a species that is so important to its environment that if the species were to be taken out in the environment will change drastically. And according to the National Park Service, the gray wolves were a very hated species back in the mid-1900s because a lot of farmers were claiming that the gray wolves were killing off their livestock, which is how they made their money and how they fed their families. The farmers spread a lot of propaganda about the gray wolves, and they hosted a lot of trophy huntings for the gray wolves, which basically hunters came, they killed the gray wolves and used their fur for coats, rugs, and a lot of times like their heads for like mantles and stuff like in their house. So naturally, the population of the gray wolves started to decrease rapidly. The wolves were quickly being exterminated, so much so that there was not even one gray wolf left in Yellowstone Park. Yeah. So because that there was no more left and they were extirpated from the area, they had to bring 31 gray wolves from Canada down to Yellowstone National Park, which the environmentalists that brought them there expected for them to just increase the environment, and they weren't anticipating all of the amazing things that the gray wolf had to bring to the area. Next slide. So, according to the Yellowstone Park website, after a few years, the gray wolves not only increased their population, they helped decrease the elk population, they helped purify water, and they help plant life flourish. A lot of people may be confused with what reintroducing the gray wolves to an area may have to do with water purification and plant life. However, nobody, not even the environmentalists, were anticipating this. So with the absence of the gray wolves, the elk population started to rapidly increase because their main predator was gone. The elk would often hang out near rivers because that's where the water was, and oftentimes they would track dirt and mud and other substances from their hooves into the water, and they contaminated the water because there were so many of them, and the water became very dirty. And also because the elk were hanging around this river, they were walking, running, stomping on all the plant life that was nearby, and it was killing off a lot of the plant life. So with the addition, the reintroduction of the gray wolves in the area, they decreased the elk population, and since the elk want to survive and they don't want to die, they started moving away from the river. And what they noticed after a few years was that the water started to become more clean, because in nature water naturally purifies itself. So after a couple of years, the water started to become more purified because the elks weren't surrounding the water and there weren't as many in the area. And because there's not as many in the area, they're not stomping on the plant life that's nearby. So what the Yellowstone National Park seen was that a lot of their plant life started to flourish, which helped their biodiversity. So this is a picture. This is kind of before, and you can kind of see it's like, I got some Google images, but you can kind of see it's a little like dry. With the reintroduction, we can see it's flourishing, and the water looks clear. There's better grass and stuff. Next. So now that I've given you guys a little bit of a background of the gray wolves, I'm going to talk about why we should keep them on the endangered species list and kind of what's the conversation going on with them and more recently. So, since the government, the EPA had received so much success with the gray wolves, they were pretty much celebrating, and hence we've seen the gray wolf population increase a lot more rapidly. Next slide, please. A lot of people want to take the gray wolves off of the list. So in 2011, there was about an estimated 5,000 gray wolves in the U.S., and which is about 4,000 more than 1975, according to nonprofit organization news, NPR nonprofit organization, sorry. And according to the Defenders.org, the gray wolves are still an endangered species and they're still on the list. However, they are delisted in certain northern areas, but for the majority part, they're still on the list. However, the Trump administration would like to take them off the list. You can go back. The Trump administration would like to take them off because their administration would like to go back to what was trophy hunting, which is basically killing of the wolves in order to promote their use for coats, rugs, and things like that, which is a really big problem because not only are they still receiving hate, and the farmers are not very happy about them being delisted because, well, they are happy about them being delisted because they will be able to kill them more often and without any fines from the government. And with the trophy hunting, there will be an increased revenue stream. So I believe that the gray wolves deserve a chance to stay on the list because they are a keystone species and they're very important to the environment. And like a lot of other species, they cause a domino effect. So once you take one thing out of a certain area or an environment, that kind of causes collapse for a lot of the other species in that environment, and it affects a lot of other ways to live, and it decreases the biodiversity in that area and many other areas. And something that we can all do, I know it may seem a little bit hard because we don't live anywhere near it. It doesn't really, we may think it doesn't really affect us. However, there are certain things that we can do, like vote for a presidential candidate who is more aware about what's happening in the environment, and a presidential candidate who is knowledgeable and has half of a brain, and knows a lot about species and the environment. And I know it's easy to say like things like who cares, it doesn't really affect me, but it's important because it affects everybody in this room, because once they take one animal off the list, there are other animals that can easily be taken off the list as well, which can have a traumatic impact on the environment and everyone in this room. Yeah, that's it.